Thank you. I love talking about the grandkids, but I have to make a correction. We just added 2 more. My oldest daughter had twins just a couple weeks ago. And daughter number 2 is due any day, and we're hoping to have grandchild number 7 within the next week. I'm just glad my wife doesn't have anything to tell me, because I'd be very concerned if we're going to grow our 4 daughters into 5. That's why I got into politics, really, is, having 4 daughters. Nobody listens to me at home. So having an opportunity like this where I have a captive audience who has to listen to me is an invitation that I'd never turn down. It's been a strange road for me, doing what I'm doing. I absolutely hated politics when I was growing up. My father was very involved in city politics, and I remember as a little boy watching these politicians come to our house, talking to my father, trying to get his support, and I thought, what a waste of time. When I grew up, I'm gonna play center field for the New York Yankees. And as I got a little older and I got in high school, I thought, maybe I better have a backup plan in case the Yankee thing didn't work out for me. So I went to school to study elementary education, and when I was at Bloomsburg, I married my wife when we were in college at that time, and I had an opportunity. I got a letter. I had an opportunity to try out with the Cincinnati Reds, and it was literally, it was like a dream come true for me. But so I had to go down to Florida, and I was very nervous because I had to tell my father that I wanted to quit school. I was in my 3rd year of college. That I had to quit school and go down to Florida to play ball. My father was a pretty tough guy. Italian guy, and they had a road construction business, and he was just a strong guy. And I remember finally getting the courage to tell him that I was going to quit school, and I was surprised what he told me. He said, go do it. If it's something you want to do, don't be afraid. Go ahead and do it. And I was so relieved, and then I asked him if he would tell that to my mother, who I didn't think would take it the same way as him. I went down to Florida, played baseball, and unfortunately for me, the Cincinnati Reds made a claim that I could not hit a curveball, and that was a little problem for them, so they were going to send me home. So I came home and went back to work in the family's road construction business, not knowing what to do with my life, and really didn't want to continue doing that. We had 2 children at that time, 2 of our first 4. And I got a card in the mail for $29.95. You can stripe your own parking lot, put the lines on a parking lot. And I got this bright idea. I saved the card, and one day I got this bright idea, and I went home, and I told my wife I'm going to quit my job, and we're going to start a line painting business. She should have left me on that day. She said, what do you know about line painting? I said, well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know too much. I know there's yellow lines in the middle. I know there's white lines on the edges. I know it wears out. She said, we have no money. How are you going to start a business? And I whipped out the card I was saving, and I said, I know that. $29.95. That's all we need. So I had to go in and tell my father that I was quitting the family construction company, and he knew I didn't have any money also, and got the courage and went up and told him what I was going to do, that I was going to quit my job, start a business. And he reminded me that same lesson that he told me years before that. He said, well, don't be afraid. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. Have the courage to do what you think is right. And again, I was so relieved, and again, I reminded him if he would tell that to my mother, because I knew she would think I had lost my mind. So I did. I left the business. We started a little line painting business. For $29.95, you get a case of aerosol cans and this little push machine to stick the can in. And I remember hiding behind bushes when cars would come, because I didn't want anybody to see what I was doing to try to put lines on the road. And I finally told my wife, I said, we got to buy like a real machine, or I'm going to go to jail if anybody sees what I'm doing. And I walked into a local bank, and I told them about this idea I had, this dream that I had, and I walked out of the bank that day with a $2,500 line of credit. And that's important, because that $2,500, although not being a lot of money, was enough to get me started on a business that in 5 years ended up growing to be the largest in the state of Pennsylvania. And when I sold the business, when I became mayor of Hazleton, it was the 6th largest in the country. It literally was the American dream come true. And I tell you the story about the $2,500 in the line of credit because that couldn't happen today. No kid with a dream and 29 bucks in his pocket could walk into a bank and walk out with a line of credit just because you had an idea. Because of Washington and all of the regulations, we have stolen the entrepreneurial spirit of this country. That's where innovation happens, when people start a business from nothing and grow it and find a better way to do things. That couldn't happen today because of Washington. And as we were growing our business, I began paying more attention to government. I began paying attention to how they interfered with small business and how it seemed like Washington didn't get it. They didn't understand. And I decided that, you know, they were fighting in Hazleton. The council and mayor were constantly fighting. And I went to the politicians and I said, listen, I'm not a politician, but I think it's important that you work together, that we create an environment for business, because businesses were leaving Hazleton, and every day you pick up the paper and it was a negative headline, and I just didn't think it was good for, one, for raising a family in a community like that, and two, for trying to grow a business when businesses were looking for a way to get out of town. They told me to be quiet, to shut up, that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I was naive, and that was probably the wrong thing to tell me. I went home and told my wife, I said, I'm running for Hazleton City Council. And I did, and I won. I got on council, and it was then that I realized that I disliked politicians even more than I thought I disliked them. Realized that I couldn't do enough as a councilman, that I had to be the mayor. That you know, I had to try to fix what I saw that what was wrong. And Hazleton was bankrupt at the time. We had a very small general fund budget. It was only a $7 million general fund budget, but we had a $1.2 million deficit. There were illegal contracts with all the labor unions. They were illegal because the mayor had signed the contracts and never had them ratified by city council, and that's the checks and balances that's supposed to protect the American people. So I went in there, and the first thing I did is I took the oath of office and went in the mayor's office, called all 4 labor unions, told them that I wasn't honoring the contracts, they were illegal. And I set a record for grievances filed against the mayor in one day. But, you know, we could have declared Act 47, we could have declared bankruptcy, let the state come in, try to fix it, but I didn't want to do that. And so I got the unions in my office and I said, listen, you know, I didn't cause this problem, but we can fix this together if we work together. And to the credit of the labor unions, we renegotiated contracts, and we saw the city start turning around. Businesses start coming back into Hazleton, and in 2 years, we wiped out the $1.2 million deficit, and we had a $500,000 surplus. I was named Mayor of the Year by my colleagues, by mayors across the state, and I thought everything was great. We start seeing people moving back into Hazleton, and something happened. You know, I had my first experience with the problem of illegal immigration. I got to tell you, I didn't wake up one day and decide that, you know, I wanted to get on Lou Dobbs, so I was going to pick on illegal immigrants. I witnessed firsthand what illegal immigration can do to a community. So I got a call one day to come down to an apartment building, and when I went into the apartment building, I couldn't believe what I saw. There were 7 mattresses on the floor of this apartment building. There were cockroaches in the refrigerator. This apartment wasn't fit for animals, yet human beings who were being exploited by the landlord. And we found out that all the people that were living in there were in the country illegally, and I didn't know why. You know, this was in early 2000. It was 2002. And we called ICE. It was INS at the time. It wasn't ICE yet. We called INS, and they told us to just tell them to move on. And, you know, that's what we did. I didn't understand why they weren't going to do anything about it, and we did. And I didn't think I'd have a problem again with something like that. But very shortly after that, on an October night, it was a Friday night in October, which is a big night in Hazleton, Friday nights in the fall, because that's high school football night, and that's when everybody goes to the game, and the kids go downtown, they hang out at a local pizzeria. And this Friday night was a little different. after the game while the kids were standing on the sidewalk. Hector Luna, an illegal alien on a drug deal gone bad, shot 2 people just 100 feet from where these high school students were. Now, Hazleton was a very quiet town. We might have 1 murder every 7 years. And the 6 years in between the murders, everyone would talk about that 1 murder years ago. Well, this murder, Hector Luna murder, terrified our town. Terrified our town. And when we finally caught Luna, we had to go to the Dominican Republic to get him. When we caught him, we found out that he was in the country illegally. And this wasn't my last encounter either. Time and time again, we were having crimes, and during the investigation of the crimes, we found out that there were more people in the country illegally. We also began to see our budget dwindling in the wrong direction. Hazleton was growing at a rapid pace. Our population grew by 50% in just a few years, which is a huge growth for any city. But our tax revenue stayed the same. I mean, think about that. Think about having a restaurant having 50% more customers, but nobody paying for the food. Eventually, your portions are going to be a little smaller, and eventually you're going to be out of business. And that's what we began to see happening in Hazleton. I'll give you an example how this problem manifested itself in so many different areas, not only with the police department, but our schools, for example. English as the second language in the year 2000 in the Hazleton Area School District, the budget was $500 for English as the second language. In 5 years, the budget grew to $1.5 million. So we were seeing this massive influx of folks, and I realized that we had an illegal immigration problem for whatever reason. We're 2,000 miles away from the nearest southern border. But here in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, we had an illegal immigration problem, and I didn't know what to do. I remember driving to City Hall one morning, and I pulled in the mayor's parking lot, and there was an elderly woman standing in my spot. And when I got out of the car, she started hitting me in the chest with her finger. And she said, "Listen, Buster, you better do something. I have become a prisoner in my own home." And it broke my heart. You know, being the mayor of a city that you were born and raised in and grew up in and had so many memories. And I walked in City Hall and I thought, while I was mayor, this is how people were living their life, that they could no longer sit on their porch, that they were afraid to go out. And I didn't know what to do about it, and I called Washington and said that I wanted to come down. It was under George Bush administration. It was December of 2005. And I went down, they gave me a meeting, and I went down with my chief of police, my city administrator, and myself, and it was great. I met with the Department of Justice, and they could not have been nicer. They brought in all these experts. I told them about the problems we were having. I told them about the gangs that were now moving into Hazleton. I told them about the illegal immigration problem that we were having. I told them about the crime problem that we were having. And I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to handle it. I wanted help. And they brought in expert after expert. And finally, at the end of the day, they gave me this nice coffee mug. They gave me a lapel pin, a pat on the back, and they showed me the door. And I remember driving home that day more frustrated than ever. You know, because while I was dealing with this problem, you know, I thought, you know, I didn't cause this. This is a federal problem. This is caused because Washington is broken, because Washington didn't help. They created this problem. And I did, again, not knowing what to do about it, a few months later, May 10th, 2006, a day that I'll never forget, a young man named Derek Kishline, 29 years old, had 3 little children, was working on his pickup truck. He had some words with the head of the Latin Kings, Pedro Cabrera. Pedro Cabrera was in the country illegally and had been arrested 7 times before he came to Hazleton, many of those times in New York City, a sanctuary city, left go. Cabrera goes in his car, gets a gun, sticks it between Derek's eyes, and shoots and kills him. We spent half of our yearly budget in overtime in the police department in catching Cabrera and his buddy. I had to sit with Mr. and Mrs. Kishline while they asked me, why was this man still in the country? Why is our son gone? Why is the father of our grandchildren gone? And why was this man still here? I didn't have an answer for her, but I knew I wasn't going to sit back any longer. Enough was enough. I created the first law in America dealing with illegal immigration as a mayor, and I was sued immediately. The next day, I was sued by illegal aliens, represented by the ACLU, who told me that if I didn't back down, that the city would be bankrupt and I would be done politically. And first thing I told them is that, I really don't care if I'm done politically. I'll just get another job. And as far as bankrupting the city is already bankrupt. So nothing from nothing is nothing. I had nothing to lose. And I vowed to fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. Even though we had no money, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to fight this to the Supreme Court. The people who sued the city of Hazleton, the illegal aliens who sued the city of Hazleton, had asked the judge if their identities could be kept confidential from us, which he granted. We weren't allowed to ask their names. I don't even know if they were from Hazleton. They then asked the judge, they went back and asked the judge if they could be excused from showing up at the trial because they were in the country illegally and they didn't want to go to a federal courthouse out of fear of being deported, which he granted. I never saw our accusers to this day. I don't know if they really exist. In America, every American citizen has the right to face their accuser. I did not. I was denied that right. I took the stand for 2 days. It was a 9-day trial. I took the stand for 2 days. I was made to feel like I was the criminal. 36 lawyers from the ACLU sued the city. And at the end, the judge ruled against us in a 200-page decision, claimed that it was Congress's intent to have strict border enforcement at our borders, but not such strict enforcement on the interior. I don't know where it said that, but I said we'll fight this to the Supreme Court. I appealed to the Third Circuit Court where we lost. I appealed to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, the state of Arizona used our ordinance. Their case was fast-tracked. They won. The Supreme Court sent the Hazleton case back down to the Third Circuit to be revisited again. They ruled against us a second time. I appealed back to the Supreme Court, where now the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. So the Hazleton case is legal in the Ninth Circuit. Fremont, Nebraska used our case. They were sued. It's legal in the Eighth Circuit. It's just not legal in Hazleton, where the law was created. I went to Congress realizing how broken Washington was. I was called every name in the book. I was, you name it, everything you can imagine, racist, bigot, anti-immigrant. I stopped saying illegal immigrant because the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times and mainstream media, by the second paragraph, they would take the word illegal out, and my comments then would be turned into an anti-immigrant comment. So I had to start saying illegal aliens so they couldn't twist my words any longer. I've had threats. I've had to have the police watch my house. I wore a bulletproof vest for a couple days and couldn't go home the same way every night. But I dug in. I wasn't going to give up. This was a problem. As I would do interviews on TV, again, not knowing how I was going to pay to defend ourselves, I started a little defense fund called Small Town Defenders. And at the end of every interview, I would say, and if you want to help the city of Hazleton, you can send a donation to smalltowndefenders.com. And it was just amazing what happened. The mailman was coming in with literally duffel bags of letters and checks from all over the country. $5, $10, $15. I remember getting a letter from a veteran. He said, "Mayor, this is all I have." It was $7. He said, "Keep fighting. You're fighting for America." I remember a senior citizen sent a letter. He said he was 88 years old in a nursing home. He told his granddaughter he had been saving quarters his whole life. He said, "Send them to that mayor in Hazleton." And I realized that this wasn't a problem in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. This was a problem in America, and nobody had the courage to stand up and fight it. And Congress and Washington was to blame for it because all they did was talk. They talk, and it sounds good, but they would never do anything. So I went to Congress, and the very first bill I introduced in 2010, the very first thing I did is I wanted to go after those mayors who declared their cities sanctuary cities. See, I was a mayor that got sued and dragged through the mud because I wanted to enforce federal laws. This is a country of laws, and I still believe in the rule of law. And here were mayors all over America who were thumbing their nose at the government, declaring sanctuary cities. So I introduced my very first bill that would mobilize against sanctuary cities, and it would withhold every single federal cent to any city that declared itself a sanctuary city. Not just money from the Department of Justice. They shouldn't get 1 penny from the federal government. You know, I had a hard time getting anybody to sign on that bill. I talked about it, and I went around Washington, and everybody agreed, but only a handful wanted to fight the fight with me. And then Kate Steinle, you remember her, the beautiful 32-year-old girl in San Francisco, gets killed by an illegal alien who had been deported and came back, and lo and behold, everyone in Congress started running to the television and said, we got to stop these sanctuary cities, we've got to do these things, you know, and it really made me angrier than I went to Washington, because I realized that Washington is really just a front and really doesn't have the courage or the backbone to do anything. And as everyone talked about it, 2 weeks later, guess what? Nobody was talking about it anymore. I tried to push my bill again, and you know, they were off to something else. And then I realized that, you know, the problem of illegal immigration, this really became a crusade for me, because here I was in the lion's den, right? I was in Washington, you know, among the place that really could do everything to stop it, but really just talks about it. So the more I looked into it, I found out that, you know what, 50% of the people that are in the country illegally didn't cross a border illegally. They come here legally on a visa. The visa expires, and they don't go home, and we can't find them. And the 9/11 Commission, which made recommendations to Congress on what we need to do so that we never, ever, ever experience another September 11th again, was very clear that we've got to stop people from overstaying their visas. That's how some of the terrorists on 9/11 got into the country. So I created a visa overstay bill that would punish people who overstayed their visa. And Speaker Ryan, when he just came on, he created this task force to talk about different issues, and you know, he said at the end of it, we're going to create an agenda. And you know, I was a little disappointed at that time, because I was there for 6 years. I thought we had an agenda, but that's okay. I went to the national security one, and everybody was talking about how we got to do something about the border, and so we got to secure the border. I'm thinking, wow, what an idea. Thank God we had this task force, you know. We never would have figured that out. We put these great minds together, and look what we came up with. So I raised my hand, and I said, listen, you know, that's great. You know, we should have done that a long time ago, but nonetheless, I said, we got to do something about people who overstay their visa, because this is how terrorists are going to get into the country. And everybody's head was nodding, and they were all excited, and I said, so I happen to have a bill that would do something about it. And all the head nodding stopped, and you couldn't hear a pin drop in that room at the time. So I got up and I left, and I went to my office. I said, listen, tell everyone I want to run my bill. You know, it seems like this task force, we have an agreement. You know, basically what I was told is, well, we can't really run your bill because your bill has the word visa in it, and we don't want to upset tourism. See, what will upset tourism when Americans get blown up in an airport? That's what's going to upset tourism. And I realized that here we are again, here I am again, in a place that does a lot of talking, but really doesn't have the courage or the backbone to do anything about this issue. I sit on the Homeland Security Committee with a good friend of mine and someone we all know, Scott Perry. And as we were on the committee was going to introduce a bill that would secure the border. And we looked at this bill and thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to tell the American people when we pass this bill that we have secured the border, and then they're going to go on to a pathway to citizenship, because that's all that was really for. Was just really a first step to get to where they wanted to get to, and that was to give amnesty to everyone that was here illegally. And looking at the bill, I found that this bill was actually going to weaken existing federal law. The federal laws that we already had to secure the border, this was going to actually weaken that law, and they were going to pass it off to the American people as a border security bill. And I got with Scott, and single-handedly, Scott and I stopped that bill from coming out of our committee. Because the American people were going to be duped, you know, by Congress, again, doing a lot of talking, but not having the courage or the backbone to do something about it. See, when I started as a mayor and talked about illegal immigration, I was called a one-trick pony, and illegal immigration, you know, it's just one issue. And I said, no, it's not. The American people are angry. The American people are angry. Our ancestors, we know how America was founded. America was founded by immigrants who people came from all over the world, but this was a country of laws, and that's why they wanted to come here. And it's Washington that was broken. And it's not one issue. It affects health care. It affects education. It affects our way of life. It affects our national security, and the American people understand that. It's Washington that doesn't get it. And you know, I used to say that, you know, they didn't enforce. People would ask me, well, why do you think Republicans and Democrats aren't doing anything about illegal immigration? I was only the mayor at the time. I didn't get to see behind the curtain yet. And I used to say, well, you know, I think Democrats, they want the vote. That's why they support illegal immigration. You know, they want people to come here and support them. And the Republicans, I think they just want cheap labor. And I think that's why they're not doing anything about it. And then I got to Washington and I found out I was wrong. They both want the vote. And that's why nothing has ever been done about it. And then here comes Donald Trump. And I realize, you know, I'm here in Washington, and, you know, it's like screaming in a forest. And here comes a man that's saying the same things that I was saying, you know, not having, you know, having the courage, not backing down, being called all the names by the media, racist, bigot. He talked about the wall, and you know, I think this guy's saying exactly what I'm saying. You know, he's exactly what we need. We need somebody that's going to come to Washington and flip the tables over. Call people for what they are. The American people want honesty. They want somebody who has the courage to stand up, and maybe he won't say it, you know, the way that some of the professional politicians would say things, but who the hell cares? You know, people would say, well, you know, is that someone you want your daughter, you know, to go to dinner? My daughter's not going to dinner with Donald Trump, trust me. I don't care how he tells it. He's not politically correct because he's not a politician. He's not taught phrases to say and words to say. Hey, we had a little experience with a very slick-talking person who can talk pretty good. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of people in Washington who are just the same. Say things, but don't have the courage to do what's right, and Donald Trump did. I was able to, as I endorsed him, being one of the first in Washington to do that, I was laughed at. For doing it. You know, my colleagues would make fun of me and make jokes. Well, guess what? They're not laughing now. I was able to have a policy paper given to Donald Trump during the campaign about my thoughts on illegal immigration and many of the things he's doing. You know, when Donald Trump talks about, you know, stopping people in the refugee program, he is right. You know, we had 4 national security experts testify that we have no way of checking the backgrounds of people coming from Syria. And ISIS said they're going to use this program to come to the United States to harm us. Donald Trump has the courage to stand up and do what's right. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to wrap it up because I know I'm going a little bit over, but I'm just going to wrap up, you know, with the fact that I'm in my 7th year now, and everything I thought about Washington, I was correct. It is still broken. It is still broken. Trust me. It is still broken, and it's going to take you, average Americans who are doing what you're doing today, to standing up and saying, no more. No more. We have taken our government back. I am there. I know who my boss is. I am there because you sent me there. And so is everyone else that I work with in Washington. And it's about time they start listening and not coming on with words, but with actions. You know, health care replacement bill, which was very frustrating for me. You know, I voted 61 times to do something to Obamacare, repeal it, repair, anything I could do to kill it. And then we had an opportunity to do something about it, and what did? We fired a blank. And I was very upset because you know, one of the things in Obamacare, you know, the Joe Wilson moment, when Joe Wilson stood up and yelled to President Obama that you lie, what that was about is President Obama said that the health care bill, that no illegal aliens, anyone in the country can get anything out of the health care bill, and Joe Wilson said you lie, and Joe Wilson was correct. The language in the bill did say that you had to be in the country legally. However, there was no verification of anyone's identities. And $750 million of your money went to people who were in the country illegally and others who were committing fraud. And lo and behold, as I'm looking at our bill, it was the same darn language as in Obamacare. And I went to the speaker and the leadership, I said, there is no way I could support this bill with this language, and that we cannot do the same thing that President Obama did and then tell the American people that we're going to stop illegal aliens from getting tax dollars. And I was really getting nowhere, so I had to make sure that my no was going to be heard louder, and every day I would tell the media, no, I'm not voting for the bill, and I knew eventually I'd get a call from Donald Trump. But I got better than that. I got a meeting with Donald Trump. And when I met with him, he said, Lou, I can't believe that you're not going to vote for this bill. And I said, no, I have a lot of problems with it. I said, and you should too. I said, you know, you ran on the fact that you were going to stop illegal immigration. How are you going to tell the American people that $750 million was going to go to people who were in the country illegally and committing fraud? You were going to give tax credits to people who shouldn't be getting them. He said, what are you talking about? And as I expected, he didn't know anything about it. And he asked Paul Ryan, he said, is this true? And I said, listen, I have a bill that's going to fix that. It's called the Verify First Act. We don't give 1 cent of a tax credit to anyone in this country unless we verify their Social Security number. And just this week, I thought that President Trump needed a little help, so I co-sponsored and we introduced a bill that would help fund the border wall. $54 billion a year goes out of our economy, out of our country, to countries in Central America, South America, and Mexico. We're going to put, my bill would put a 2% surcharge, a 2% fee on any wire transfer of money out of this country to Mexico and to the southern countries. It would bring in about $1 billion a year to help pay for the border wall. It's about time that people in Washington keep their promises, because we know we have a president who will stand up for you, who will fight for you, and will continue to make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.